They chained me to an alien commander. I had no idea how dangerous she was. Ethan Vance slowly opened his eyes, the dim light of the chamber making his head throb. His vision was blurry, and the metallic scent of the room filled his nose. He tried to move, only to find his arms locked in heavy restraints. Panic flared for a moment, but he forced himself to stay calm. He was trained for difficult situations, but nothing in his experience prepared him for this. He looked to his side and froze. A figure sat across from him, a shadow in the half-light, yet commanding presence filled the small chamber. The moment their eyes met, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The figure was tall, taller than any human, with broad shoulders covered in what looked like sleek armor. Her skin was a muted green with a subtle shimmer, and her amber eyes glowed faintly in the low light. Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Who are you?" he croaked. The alien commander said nothing. She simply observed him, her gaze steady and unflinching. It was a look that seemed to see past his body, past his restraints, and straight into his mind. Ethan could feel a strange weight pressing against his thoughts, as though she could anticipate every fear he tried to hide. He swallowed hard, trying to gather his courage. He noticed that their chains were not separate, but linked by a thick metallic bar. Every slight movement he made caused her to shift slightly as well. They were forced into proximity in a way that felt intentional. The realization struck him. Whoever had put them together wanted something more than mere captivity. The silence stretched, and Ethan felt the tension in the room grow heavier. Outside the chamber, he could hear the faint hum of machinery and the distant footsteps of alien guards. Occasionally, he caught snatches of conversation, but the words were alien to his ears. He couldn't understand a thing. That was perhaps worse than being chained. In a strange world with rules he could not read, he was utterly powerless. Yet, despite her imposing appearance, the alien commander remained still. Ethan noticed small details: the way her fingers rested on the chains, the subtle shift in her stance, the slight tilt of her head. Each movement was deliberate. She exuded control, as if she were aware of every motion around her. Ethan had fought in simulated combat training, learned to predict opponents' moves, but even then he felt unprepared to face this presence. Hours passed. Ethan grew restless, trying to shift, trying to make sense of his situation. Finally, he risked speaking again. Why am I here?" His voice echoed slightly in the metal room. The commander tilted her head slightly, the closest thing to a response. There was no anger in her expression, only a quiet intensity. It was as though she were waiting for him to answer a question he didn't even know he had been asked. Ethan's mind raced. He had been on a reconnaissance mission near the edge of known space. His ship had been attacked suddenly, and he remembered flashes of light and chaos before losing consciousness. But he had never expected to wake up chained to this being. He didn't know her name, her rank, or her purpose. She could be a prisoner, but then why had the aliens chained him to her? He looked closer at her armor. It was unlike any human military design. Sleek, reinforced, and oddly elegant, it seemed to enhance her form while providing protection. He could see scratches and dents, evidence that she had been in combat before. That only increased the aura of danger around her. Yet, as he watched, he noticed something else, a slight hesitation in her movements, as though she too was cautious. Ethan realized they were both being tested, trapped in this strange arrangement by a force neither fully understood. Eventually, the commander moved. Her chains rattled softly, and she rose to her full height. Ethan flinched instinctively, but she did not advance toward him. Instead, she surveyed the room, her glowing eyes scanning the walls as if reading secrets hidden in the metal. For the first time she spoke, though the words were alien. Ethan could not understand a thing, but her tone was measured, calm, and authoritative. He sensed that even in this language, she conveyed command not just of others but of herself. The door to the chamber hissed open, and two guards entered. They were smaller than the commander, less imposing, and moved with nervous precision. They carried trays of what appeared to be rations, though the food was foreign and unrecognizable. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse, but hunger gnawed at him. He reached for a piece, his hand shaking slightly. The commander observed silently, her amber eyes tracking him with an intensity that made him feel as though every choice was being evaluated. As he ate, Ethan tried to read her expression. There was no malice, no overt hostility. Yet the air around her was dangerous, electric in a way he could not explain. He remembered training scenarios in which opponents relied on strength and intimidation. This was different. Her danger lay in her mind, her perception, her ability to anticipate and respond. Ethan understood then that brute force would not win against her. Only intelligence, patience, and adaptability might suffice. Days passed, and the routine became clear. Guards brought meals, spoke in their alien tongue, and left. Ethan spent hours observing the commander, learning her habits. She moved with precision, rarely speaking to him, yet he gradually noticed patterns. When the chains clinked, she adjusted instantly. When he shifted in his seat, she seemed to anticipate it. It was frustrating and fascinating. Despite being chained together, they developed a form of silent communication, a rhythm that allowed them to move without colliding, without causing each other harm. One night, Ethan awoke to a sound outside the chamber, the quiet hum of energy, the distant vibration of engines. He looked at the commander. She was awake too, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time, she met his gaze and nodded slightly. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, yet it carried weight. Ethan realized that trust, even a tiny fragment of it, was forming between them. In a place of fear and uncertainty, they had found the first thread of connection. Ethan began testing the limits of their chained arrangement. He shifted slightly, watched her response, and noticed subtle adjustments she made. The more he observed, the more he understood her intelligence. She was not merely a fighter. She was a strategist, someone who could analyze, predict, and adapt in ways that left him in awe. Yet beneath the commanding exterior, Ethan glimpsed hints of vulnerability, a flicker of hesitation when a guard passed, a fleeting shadow behind her eyes. The human mind, he realized, often underestimated beings unlike itself. He had assumed strength was visible in physical form, but her power was in her mind, in her ability to navigate complex situations, to remain calm under pressure, and to command respect without raising her voice. Ethan felt both fear and admiration, a mixture that kept him alert and alive. By the end of the week, Ethan had begun speaking more openly, though carefully. He asked about the ship, the crew, the strange technology around him. She answered indirectly, sometimes with gestures, sometimes with a single word that he could not understand. Yet in those moments, he realized they were learning from each other. She observed his problem-solving, his adaptability, and he observed her decisions, her tactics. Even in chains, they were beginning to form a partnership. Ethan thought of home, the blue sky of Earth, the familiar smells of his small apartment, the comfort of human interaction. Here, on this alien vessel, everything was foreign. Yet he felt something else, a sense of challenge, of discovery, of testing limits he never imagined. The commander, dangerous as she was, had become the measure of that challenge. One day, as they were left alone, a sudden alarm blared throughout the ship. Lights flashed red and the metallic corridors thrummed with movement. Ethan froze, instinctively looking to the commander. She stood, chains rattling softly, her expression unreadable, and then she acted. With movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, she navigated the chains, positioning herself to protect both of them from unseen threats. Ethan realized that her danger was not merely rumored. She was formidable, capable of turning any situation to her advantage. As the alarm subsided and the chaos faded, Ethan sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. He had survived his first real test with her. More importantly, he had glimpsed the truth. She was more than a threat. She was a being of intelligence, courage, and power beyond his understanding. And for the first time, he understood why the aliens had chained him to her. It was not merely to control him, but to expose him to something extraordinary, something that might change the course of both their fates. In that dim chamber, bound by chains and circumstance, a human and a legendary alien commander began an unspoken alliance. Fear, caution, and curiosity intertwined, forming a bond neither fully understood. Ethan realized that survival depended not on strength alone, but on trust, observation, and adaptability. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, he knew one thing for certain. He had no idea how dangerous she truly was, but he also knew that he had never met anyone like her before, and somehow, that knowledge both terrified and inspired him. Days passed in the dim corridors of the alien warship, and Ethan slowly adjusted to his new reality. The chains that bound him to the commander, which at first felt like instruments of fear and control, became a strange kind of tether. They forced him to move carefully, to pay attention to her, and to notice details he would have otherwise missed. At first, the constant proximity was awkward. Every step he took required her to adjust, and every adjustment she made caused him to think twice about his own movements. Yet, in that awkward rhythm, something remarkable began to emerge: communication without words. Ethan discovered that subtle gestures, a tilt of her head, the shift of her weight, the smallest movement of her hands carried meaning. At first, he misread them often, nearly tripping over her as she sidestepped with perfect precision. But gradually, he began to anticipate her responses, to predict her intentions. They developed an unspoken understanding, a quiet rhythm that allowed them to move in the narrow corridors without colliding. It was exhausting work, but it also made Ethan feel a strange sense of partnership. One morning, as the ship hummed with low vibrations from its engines, Ethan tried a small experiment. He shifted slightly to his left, testing her reaction. The commander adjusted her stance just in time to keep the chains taut without pulling him off balance. Then she did something unexpected. She looked him directly in the eye and gave a small nod. Ethan froze, stunned. It was the first acknowledgement he had received from her, the first hint that she recognized his efforts and perhaps even respected them. As the day wore on, Ethan began to study her more closely. He observed the way she moved, the precision in her posture, and the quiet confidence in her every action. Guards passed by and instinctively gave her more space than they gave him, as if sensing her authority. Ethan realized that her danger wasn't only in her physical strength. It was in her presence, her intelligence, and her ability to command respect without uttering a single word. The more he watched her, the more he understood that survival around her required observation, patience, and careful thought. Despite the tension, moments of quiet curiosity and discovery emerged. Ethan learned to anticipate her movements, to offer subtle adjustments when the chains pulled in awkward directions, and even to hold the doors open when they moved through the corridors together. She began to tolerate, and occasionally rely on, his assistance. While she remained stoic and unreadable much of the time, Ethan noticed small gestures, a brief glance that lingered, a shift that allowed him more freedom, that suggested she was starting to assess him not just as a prisoner, but as an ally of sorts. One afternoon, as they were navigating a section of the ship Ethan had not seen before, he noticed intricate markings along the walls. They were symbols, perhaps a kind of writing, glowing faintly in the low light. He paused to examine them, and the commander did something extraordinary. She placed her hand near his shoulder, not touching him aggressively, but guiding him gently, as if indicating the meaning of the symbols. Ethan realized she was teaching him without words, testing his ability to notice, to learn, and to understand. The moment was fleeting, but it filled him with awe. Here was a being who had the power to command armies, yet she chose to communicate and share knowledge in subtle, precise ways. As they moved deeper into the ship, Ethan began to understand the scale of their environment. It was vast, unlike any human vessel he had ever seen, with corridors that seemed endless and rooms filled with technology that defied his understanding. Despite the alien complexity, he started to notice patterns. The commander moved with familiarity, navigating the ship as though she had spent years learning its secrets. Ethan, in turn, learned to anticipate the ship's rhythm, the sounds of engines, the vibrations underfoot, and the subtle signals that indicated a guard was nearby. Together, they became a team in motion, linked by chains yet synchronized in purpose. One evening, the commander finally spoke, in her alien language, of course, which Ethan could not understand. But the tone was measured, calm, and instructive. She repeated a series of gestures, pointing to a control panel and then to the chains, as if explaining something about their connection. Ethan followed her instructions carefully, fumbling at first, then gradually mastering the small adjustments that allowed them to move more freely. Each successful step strengthened the trust between them, however fragile it might be. Their growing cooperation did not go unnoticed by the ship's crew. Guards who had once glared at Ethan now looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. They whispered among themselves, casting glances at the commander and then at Ethan, as if debating the nature of their strange partnership. Ethan sensed that he had become more than a prisoner. He was now part of a delicate balance on the ship, a human whose presence was unexpected but influential. Despite the progress, tension remained. Ethan never let himself forget the danger he was in. One wrong move, one misjudgment, could trigger the commander's wrath or the crew's suspicion. But he also discovered that danger could be managed through observation and intelligence. The commander, he realized, was testing him as much as he was testing her. She wanted to know whether he could think, adapt, and act under pressure. She wanted to see if humanity's unpredictable creativity could complement her own strategic mind. One day, an unexpected situation arose. A small security drone malfunctioned in the corridor ahead, emitting sparks and making a loud, shrill noise. Ethan froze instinctively, unsure of how to proceed. The commander moved with calm precision, guiding him through subtle shifts of the chains. She placed herself between him and the hazard, using her body and the chains to ensure they avoided the sparks. Ethan marveled at her skill, not brute strength, but coordination, anticipation, and the ability to use the chains to their advantage. In that moment, he realized that their link, once a symbol of captivity, had become a tool for mutual protection. Over the next few days, Ethan's understanding of the commander deepened. She was fearless but not reckless. She was precise but not rigid. She observed, calculated, and acted with purpose. And gradually, he began to see moments of subtle humanity in her. A brief sigh when alone, a glance at a view screen with faint curiosity, a small adjustment that allowed him slightly more comfort. These glimpses told him that beneath the formidable exterior was a being capable of thought, reflection, and perhaps even trust. Ethan, for his part, adapted quickly. He learned to anticipate her intentions, to move in harmony with her, and to offer assistance when appropriate. He discovered that his human creativity, the ability to improvise, to consider solutions that were not obvious, complemented her structured brilliance. He started to feel that he was contributing, not merely surviving, and in that small sense of agency, he found hope. One night as they rested in a quiet corridor, Ethan dared to speak more openly. Why are we chained together?" His voice was low, careful, testing her patience. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if weighing the question. Then she made a series of gestures that suggested observation and evaluation. Ethan could not interpret the meaning fully, but he felt the intent. She was assessing his understanding, his patience, his ability to grasp subtle cues. It was then that Ethan realized the truth. This was not merely captivity. The chains were not meant solely to restrain. They were a test, a forced partnership, a way to evaluate both of them in tandem. And in that realization came a new perspective. He was not helpless. He could learn, adapt, and survive not through brute force, but through observation, cooperation, and human ingenuity. As the days passed into weeks, a rhythm developed. They moved through the ship together, learning its systems, navigating its corridors, and avoiding the occasional attention of guards. The chains, once uncomfortable, became a symbol of their connection. Each adjustment, each careful step, strengthened their unspoken bond. Ethan felt something he had never expected in captivity: a growing respect for the commander and a cautious admiration for her intelligence and skill. He thought often of his home on Earth, of the friends and family he had left behind, and the ordinary life he had taken for granted. But here, on this alien ship, he was learning something extraordinary. Humans, he realized, had strengths that even the most formidable alien warriors could underestimate: creativity, adaptability, and the capacity for moral choice under pressure. And in this strange partnership, he was beginning to see how those strengths could matter in ways he had never imagined. By the end of the second week, Ethan no longer felt entirely like a prisoner. He was a participant, a contributor, an unexpected ally in a complex system. The commander, too, had begun to rely on his observations, his problem-solving, and his unique perspective. Though she remained distant in many ways, her gestures, her careful adjustments, and the occasional glance suggested that she acknowledged his value. In that quiet, metallic world, bound by chains but connected in purpose, Ethan realized that danger could be understood, navigated, and even respected. The commander, for all her formidable skill and fearsome reputation, had revealed a truth he could scarcely have imagined: that partnership, trust, and human ingenuity could transform a situation that seemed hopeless into one filled with potential. And as he drifted to sleep that night, chains clinking softly in the empty corridor, he felt a flicker of hope, hope that together, he and the alien commander could face whatever the vast, uncharted universe might throw at them. The hum of the alien warship had become a background to Ethan's life, a steady rhythm that marked his days. He had grown accustomed to the chains that bound him to the commander, and he had begun to read her subtle gestures with increasing accuracy. It was not comfort exactly, but a strange familiarity that allowed him to anticipate her actions and, in turn, act in ways that complemented her extraordinary skill. One morning, the routine was shattered. A high-pitched alarm blared through the corridors, accompanied by flashing red lights that reflected off the metallic walls. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had learned to read the signals. This was serious. The commander's eyes glowed with calm precision as she adjusted her stance, chains taut between them, ready for whatever had caused the disturbance. They moved together instinctively. Ethan's first steps were careful, testing her reactions, and she responded with the fluidity of someone who had anticipated countless scenarios. The corridor stretched ahead, filled with the soft hum of machinery, the echo of distant boots, and the occasional flash of light from control panels. Ethan felt the weight of the situation settle over him. This was no drill, and it was no simple malfunction. Something had shifted aboard the ship, and they were at the center of it. As they turned a corner, Ethan saw the first signs of disruption. Guards were moving quickly, their expressions tense. The ship's automated systems blinked erratically, and the air was charged with urgency. Ethan froze for a moment, unsure of how to proceed, but the commander placed her hand near his shoulder, guiding him silently. Their chains, once cumbersome, now became a conduit for coordination. Every shift of weight, every step, was a conversation without words. The source of the chaos soon became clear. A rival faction of alien forces had infiltrated the outer sections of the ship. The intruders were not immediately visible, but their presence was marked by subtle disturbances. A misaligned door, a displaced panel, the faint whir of machinery operating outside protocol. Ethan realized that their chains, their connection, and their understanding of each other could become crucial in navigating this danger. The commander moved first, positioning herself to block potential threats while guiding Ethan to safer ground. He followed, heart pounding, marveling at her awareness and agility. She navigated the narrow corridors with a precision that made every human instinct he had learned in training feel slow and clumsy. Yet, as clumsy as he felt, his human creativity became an unexpected asset. When the commander encountered a locked passage, he suggested a solution that had not occurred to her, a sequence of movements that manipulated the ship's systems in a subtle, non-violent way to bypass the barrier. She hesitated for a moment, then followed his lead, executing the maneuver flawlessly. Ethan felt a surge of pride, tempered by the awareness that they were still in the midst of danger. The commander's amber eyes flicked to him briefly, almost imperceptibly, and he interpreted it as acknowledgement. In the silent language they had developed, it was a compliment. They moved on, a pair of interdependent beings navigating a space designed to challenge and test them. As they reached the control hub, the scale of the situation became apparent. The intruders were attempting to access critical navigation systems, and the ship's AI was struggling to respond. Ethan and the commander assessed the situation quickly. She moved to a panel, her fingers dancing over controls with fluid precision. Ethan followed her lead, contributing where his human perspective offered a fresh approach. Together, they created a strategy. She would manipulate the systems to stall the intruders, while he would monitor and adjust secondary controls to prevent any breach. Time seemed to stretch. The ship vibrated under them, alarms blared, and the corridors outside were alive with movement. Yet in the center of the chaos, a strange calm existed between Ethan and the commander. Their chains, once symbols of captivity, now represented collaboration. Each adjustment, each movement, was part of a complex dance that balanced risk and reward. Ethan realized that this was more than survival. It was a test of intellect, observation, and trust. At one point, a series of lights indicated that an intruder had reached a critical junction. Ethan acted on instinct, manipulating the controls to reroute power, creating a temporary block without alerting the intruder to their presence. The commander adjusted instantly, positioning herself to monitor the junction and coordinate the next move. For the first time, Ethan felt that his human creativity and intuition were not just valuable, they were essential. The commander, for all her experience and power, relied on him in ways that she did not acknowledge aloud but that he could feel in the subtle shifts of her attention. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The intruders, frustrated by the seamless coordination between Ethan and the commander, began to retreat, their movements cautious and hesitant. The ship's system stabilized, returning to normal operation, and the corridors gradually emptied. Ethan's body was tense with exhaustion, his mind alert but spent, yet he could not stop the thrill that coursed through him. They had done it, together. When the immediate danger passed, they retreated to a quieter section of the ship. Ethan sank to the floor, chains clinking softly as he breathed deeply. The commander remained standing, surveying the corridor, but he noticed a subtle relaxation in her posture. She had trusted him, relied on him, and they had succeeded. It was an unspoken victory, a moment that neither needed to celebrate aloud, yet it resonated with profound significance. As they rested, Ethan began to reflect on what had just occurred. The commander's reputation as dangerous had been well earned, not through brute force alone but through intelligence, strategy, and an unwavering presence. He realized that danger could be respected and even admired when tempered with trust and collaboration. And for the first time, he sensed that she might see him as more than a human prisoner, perhaps as a partner, or at least an indispensable ally. Over the next few days, their cooperation deepened. Ethan learned to anticipate her decisions with increasing accuracy, and she allowed him subtle latitude in his movements and choices. They explored areas of the ship together, assessing systems, observing crew behavior, and refining their silent communication. In one corridor, Ethan noticed a misalignment in a maintenance panel. He adjusted it instinctively, and the commander's amber eyes flicked toward him briefly, a silent nod of approval. He realized that small acts of initiative mattered, and that his human perspective could complement her alien precision. During their shared routines, Ethan began to notice glimpses of her personality beyond the commander's role. A fleeting look of curiosity at a console, a brief adjustment to allow him more comfort, a subtle pause to consider an observation he had made. These were signs of awareness and adaptability, traits that Ethan recognized and respected. He began to understand that her danger was not merely physical or tactical, but rooted in her mind, her perception, and her ability to anticipate consequences with clarity and precision. One evening, as the ship hummed in the quiet of night cycle operations, Ethan spoke softly. "I don't know if you understand me, but I think we make a good team." The commander tilted her head, studying him carefully. Her chains shifted slightly, bringing them closer, and Ethan felt the subtle acknowledgement of his words. It was not praise exactly, but recognition, a validation that he existed in her calculations not merely as a human variable, but as a collaborator. Their bond, still fragile, began to strengthen in these small ways. Ethan learned patience, observation, and the subtle art of coordination. The commander, in turn, adjusted her approach, allowing him incremental freedom to contribute and make decisions. Each day brought small victories. A system stabilized, a corridor navigated without alerting guards, a challenge overcome through joint ingenuity. The chains, once symbols of imprisonment, had become instruments of connection, teaching them to rely on one another in ways neither could have predicted. Then came the most important test of all. The ship received a transmission from the rival faction, warning that they would return in force unless the commander surrendered. The message was clear. They were powerful, organized, and relentless. Ethan felt the tension spike in his chest. This was no ordinary threat. It was a challenge that could determine the fate of the ship, and perhaps the commander herself. The commander turned to him, her expression unreadable but her eyes glowing with intensity. For the first time, she gestured directly to him, clearly indicating that his input would matter in the coming events. Ethan realized that they were about to face the ultimate test of their partnership. Strategy, intelligence, and mutual trust would be more important than strength or speed. Together, they would need to navigate the complexities of the ship, the intentions of the rival faction, and the unpredictable variables that came with human creativity. Ethan's heart raced, but he felt a strange calm as well. The bond they had formed through chains, observation, and silent communication had prepared him for this moment. He understood the commander in ways he had not expected, and she, in turn, had recognized his value. It was a fragile alliance, built on necessity, intelligence, and mutual respect, but it was enough. As they moved to the command center to prepare, Ethan noticed how seamlessly they coordinated. Every shift of the chains, every subtle movement, was part of a larger dance of preparation. He understood that their success depended on trust, observation, and the courage to act decisively under pressure. And for the first time, he felt not like a prisoner, but like a partner, ready to face danger alongside someone whose skill and intelligence inspired awe. The approaching challenge loomed over them like a storm, But within the chains and shared understanding, Ethan and the commander had discovered something extraordinary. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. And in that moment, he realized that the real test had begun, not of strength, not of speed, but of courage, intelligence, and the human capacity to adapt, improvise, and trust. The alarm lights had dimmed, and the corridors were no longer filled with the urgent hum of activity. Yet the tension lingered like a shadow over the ship. Ethan felt his muscles ache from days of careful movement, observation, and coordination with the commander. The chains that bound them were no longer just restraints. They had become extensions of each other, guiding, supporting, and balancing in perfect unison. He had grown used to the strange rhythm, to the way her presence shaped every step he took. The commander moved with her usual precision, scanning the ship's controls and monitoring the status of its systems. Ethan followed closely, observing every motion, every decision. The alarms had been silenced, but the real challenge was just beginning. The rival faction that had attempted to infiltrate the ship remained a threat, and the transmission warning they had received was clear. Surrender was not an option, and a stronger force was likely to arrive soon. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. He knew that the commander's skill alone would not guarantee their safety. They would need strategy, intelligence, and perhaps a touch of human ingenuity to navigate what lay ahead. As they moved into a quieter section of the ship, the commander finally spoke, her voice low and precise. Ethan could not understand the words, but the tone carried intent and clarity. She gestured toward a set of consoles, then toward him, indicating that his input was required. He hesitated for a moment, aware of the weight of responsibility, but then realized that he was ready. Their days of silent coordination, observation, and trust had prepared him for this moment. Together, they examined the ship systems, Ethan offering suggestions based on his human perspective, the commander implementing and adjusting with flawless execution. She began to reveal small details about the ship, showing him the purpose of certain controls and the potential vulnerabilities in the system. It was a lesson in trust and collaboration, a rare glimpse into the mind of someone who had spent years mastering strategy and command. Ethan felt a sense of awe. Her intelligence was staggering, yet she shared it in subtle, deliberate ways that allowed him to contribute meaningfully. As they worked, the commander paused, her gaze lingering on him for a moment. Ethan felt a strange mix of fear and respect. He realized that she was testing him, not with danger alone, but with observation. She wanted to see how he would respond under pressure, how he would handle responsibility, and whether he could act decisively while maintaining the balance they had cultivated. In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. This dangerous woman, feared by so many, was not only assessing his survival skills but his character. Over the following hours, they refined their strategy. Ethan learned to anticipate her decisions, and she, in turn, allowed him small latitude to suggest solutions. Their chains, which had once symbolized captivity, now became a tool for coordination. Every movement, every adjustment, reinforced their bond and enhanced their ability to respond to the challenges ahead. They moved with a rhythm that was almost seamless, a silent language of motion, weight, and intention that bridged the gap between human and alien. Then, in a moment of quiet, the commander revealed something unexpected. She gestured to a display showing her identification and rank, symbols that Ethan recognized as representing authority far beyond the guards who had captured him. She was not merely a prisoner. She was a high-ranking military leader, someone whose influence and skill had shaped battles and decisions across her faction. The realization hit Ethan like a wave. The danger he had sensed was not just physical or tactical. It was political, strategic, and profound. Ethan's mind struggled to process the implications. The aliens who had chained him to her had not done so lightly. They had placed a human in direct proximity to one of the most formidable leaders in the galaxy, someone whose decisions could alter the balance of power. And yet, in this confined space, she had allowed him to contribute, to observe, and to participate. She had tested him, challenged him, and in subtle ways trusted him. The chains, the movement, the silent communication, all of it had been preparation for something far greater than either of them had yet faced. The commander's amber eyes met his, and for the first time she conveyed intent without words. Ethan understood that their survival depended not on fear or intimidation, but on collaboration, trust, and the blending of human adaptability with alien precision. He realized that his role was no longer passive. He was a partner, an essential element in the strategy that would determine the outcome of the challenges ahead. As they prepared for the next phase, Ethan observed the ship's corridors and systems with renewed attention. The rival faction might return at any moment, and the commander's intelligence, while formidable, could not anticipate every variable. He began to offer suggestions based on patterns he noticed, small adjustments to energy flow and subtle manipulations of the ship's systems. She implemented his ideas flawlessly, her movements precise and deliberate, her focus unwavering. Together, they created a network of anticipation and response, a strategy built on observation, intelligence, and cooperation. In the quiet moments between tasks, Ethan glimpsed more of the commander's personality. She was disciplined and composed, yet capable of subtle empathy. A brief pause to consider his input, a careful adjustment to allow him slightly more freedom of movement, a faint acknowledgement of his initiative. These small gestures conveyed respect and recognition. Ethan felt a growing admiration for her, not just for her skill, but for her wisdom and the way she integrated intelligence with humanity. The next challenge came sooner than expected. Sensors indicated an anomaly in the ship's outer systems, a fluctuation that suggested interference or intrusion. The commander moved with her usual precision, positioning herself to assess the situation while guiding Ethan alongside her. Their chains, taut and responsive, allowed them to move as a unit. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities, and he realized that his human perspective offered solutions the commander might not consider. Together, they navigated the anomaly, adjusting systems, rerouting energy, and stabilizing the ship with a combination of precision and improvisation. Hours of concentrated effort passed, and the anomaly was resolved. Ethan felt exhaustion in every muscle, yet a sense of accomplishment filled him. The commander, for her part, displayed a rare moment of acknowledgement. She gestured toward him, a subtle nod that conveyed approval and recognition. It was not praise in the human sense, but it carried meaning. He had contributed, adapted, and acted with intelligence under pressure. Their bond, fragile yet strong, had been tested and strengthened. In the aftermath, the commander allowed Ethan a rare moment of rest. He observed her quietly, noticing the small signs of thought and reflection beneath her formidable exterior. For all her power and skill, she was still capable of observation, adaptation, and subtle consideration. Ethan realized that danger, when paired with intelligence and strategic thinking, was not merely a threat. It was a challenge that could inspire growth, learning, and cooperation. As the ship continued its journey, Ethan began to understand the magnitude of the situation. The commander's identity, her rank, and her experience meant that the stakes were far higher than he had imagined. Yet, he also recognized his own value. His human ingenuity, adaptability, and moral judgment had allowed them to navigate crises that might have overwhelmed a purely alien perspective. He was not just surviving, he was contributing, shaping outcomes, and earning a measure of trust from one of the most formidable beings he had ever encountered. In a quiet corridor, as the ship hummed around them, Ethan dared to speak again. "I don't know what comes next, but I want to help. I want to be useful." The commander's amber eyes studied him, and for the first time she responded with a gesture he could understand. She extended her hand slightly, guiding him toward a console, then toward a series of controls. The meaning was clear. She trusted him, relied on his input, and acknowledged his role in what was to come. Ethan felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known. The chains, which had once represented captivity and fear, had become symbols of connection, collaboration, and mutual reliance. He understood that survival, intelligence, and trust were intertwined, and that the true measure of strength lay not in physical power alone, but in the ability to adapt, learn, and cooperate under pressure. As they prepared for the next stage of their journey, Ethan reflected on the lessons he had learned. The commander, feared and respected across her faction, had revealed that intelligence, strategic thinking, and careful observation were forms of power as significant as physical might. He realized that humans, with their creativity, adaptability, and capacity for moral choice, could contribute in ways that even the most formidable alien minds might overlook. Their partnership was fragile, unusual, and unprecedented, yet it held the potential to shape outcomes far beyond either of their individual abilities. The day wore on, and the ship continued its steady course through the stars. Ethan and the commander moved together, their chains taut but responsive, a constant reminder of the bond that had developed through necessity, observation, and mutual respect. Each step, each adjustment, reinforced their connection and enhanced their ability to respond to challenges. Finally, as the ship system stabilized and the immediate threats subsided, Ethan felt a moment of quiet reflection. He understood that the commander's danger, her reputation, and her skill were not barriers but opportunities, opportunities to learn, to adapt, and to demonstrate the value of human ingenuity in a universe that often underestimated it. He realized that the chains, once symbols of fear and captivity, had become instruments of connection, trust, and mutual reliance. In that moment, Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer just a human prisoner. He was a partner, a collaborator, and a participant in a story that stretched far beyond the confines of the ship. The commander, for all her formidable skill and fearsome reputation, had recognized his potential, relied on his input, and allowed him to contribute in meaningful ways. Together they had navigated challenges, learned from one another, and forged a bond that, though fragile, held the promise of extraordinary outcomes. And as they moved through the corridors, chains clinking softly in the quiet hum of the ship, Ethan realized that the real journey was only beginning. The commander's identity, her skill, and the stakes they faced had revealed a universe full of danger, intelligence, and opportunity. Yet within that universe, he had discovered something invaluable: the power of human ingenuity, the importance of trust, and the potential of collaboration between beings from entirely different worlds. The ship's corridors were quiet, almost eerily so, as Ethan and the commander moved through them. The earlier disturbances had passed, but the tension lingered like a faint hum, reminding them that the galaxy outside was unpredictable and danger could appear without warning. The chains between them, once symbols of captivity, had become instruments of coordination, a connection that allowed them to move as one. Each step was deliberate, precise, and shared. Ethan could feel the commander's focus as they approached the control hub. She was calm, measured, and aware of every detail around them. He had learned to anticipate her movements, to read her subtle gestures, and to contribute where his human perspective offered insight. The challenges they had faced together had strengthened their bond and forged a rhythm that transcended words. As they reached the hub, sensors indicated a new anomaly: a small, unidentified vessel approaching at high speed. Its design was alien, yet unlike anything Ethan had seen before. The commander's amber eyes glowed with alertness as she analyzed the situation. She gestured for him to assist, and Ethan stepped forward, reviewing the ship's controls and offering suggestions. His human ingenuity, developed through years of problem-solving and quick thinking, complemented her precise calculations. The approaching vessel slowed and projected a holographic message. Symbols flickered in the air, accompanied by alien sounds that Ethan could not understand. The commander studied the projection carefully, her eyes narrowing as she interpreted its meaning. Ethan noticed a faint shift in her posture, a subtle signal that indicated the message was more than a simple greeting. He realized that they were being tested once again, and that the outcome depended on their ability to think, adapt, and act together. Together, they devised a plan. The commander manipulated the ship's systems with flawless execution, while Ethan contributed ideas based on his observations and understanding of the vessel's likely intentions. They worked in tandem, their chains guiding each movement, ensuring that every action complemented the other. It was a delicate balance of strategy, intelligence, and trust, and they had perfected it through weeks of shared experience. As the vessel approached, a series of calculations and adjustments stabilized the ship's trajectory, preventing any potential collision or interference. The holographic projection flickered again, this time conveying a different message, a request for parley. The commander glanced at Ethan, and he understood her intent. They would negotiate, using strategy, intelligence, and their combined understanding to achieve a resolution without unnecessary conflict. In the communication that followed, Ethan assisted by monitoring systems, analyzing patterns, and offering suggestions for responses. The commander spoke in her language, precise and deliberate, and Ethan observed the reactions of the other vessel. Through careful negotiation, subtle adjustments, and coordinated strategy, they reached an agreement. The other vessel acknowledged their authority, accepted their terms, and departed without incident. Ethan felt a surge of relief and accomplishment. They had faced a potential threat, navigated complex communication, and achieved a peaceful resolution. The chains that had once represented restriction had become a symbol of collaboration, trust, and shared problem-solving. The commander, for her part, allowed a rare gesture of acknowledgement. She adjusted the chains slightly, giving him more freedom of movement, a silent recognition of his contributions. As they continued through the ship, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he had awakened in that dim chamber, chained to a formidable and mysterious commander, he had learned to observe, adapt, and trust. He had discovered that human ingenuity, moral judgment, and creativity were valuable even in the presence of beings far stronger and more experienced. The commander's skill, intelligence, and presence had challenged him, but they had also allowed him to grow, to contribute, and to find purpose. Their partnership deepened as they moved toward the ship's bridge. Systems needed monitoring, routes needed planning, and potential threats had to be considered. Ethan's perspective offered solutions the commander might not have anticipated, while her precision and experience ensured flawless execution. Together, they navigated the complexities of the vessel, responding to challenges with a blend of human adaptability and alien mastery. In one quiet moment, Ethan spoke, careful and deliberate. "I never imagined I could work alongside someone like you. I've learned more in these days than in my entire career." The commander's eyes met his, and for the first time she responded with a subtle gesture that he could interpret clearly. A nod, a tilt of the head, an acknowledgement of respect and trust. It was not friendship in the human sense, but it was meaningful, and it strengthened the bond that had formed between them. Days passed as they continued their journey through uncharted space. Each challenge tested their coordination, observation, and problem-solving. Minor malfunctions, navigational obstacles, and unexpected communications from distant vessels all required attention. Yet Ethan and the commander had developed a rhythm, a shared understanding that allowed them to act swiftly and effectively. They moved as one, their chains no longer restrictive but empowering, a tangible reminder of the trust and collaboration that had developed. During their quiet moments, Ethan began to notice subtle aspects of the commander's personality. Her focus was unwavering, yet she allowed herself small gestures of consideration. A pause to let him adjust, a subtle shift to reduce tension, a glance that acknowledged his input. He realized that beneath her formidable exterior lay intelligence, awareness, and a capacity for reflection. Danger, he understood, was not just a measure of physical skill, but of mind, strategy, and the ability to respond thoughtfully under pressure. One evening, as they monitored the ship's external sensors, Ethan detected a pattern that suggested a minor energy fluctuation in one of the propulsion systems. He pointed it out to the commander, offering a potential adjustment. She analyzed his suggestion, then implemented a precise correction that stabilized the system. The movement was seamless, a testament to their combined effort. Ethan felt a surge of pride. His human perspective had complemented her skill, and together they had maintained the integrity of the vessel. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing challenge. Ethan understood her intentions, and she allowed him to contribute in ways that mattered. The chains, once a symbol of captivity, had become a conduit for coordination, trust, and shared problem-solving. Every adjustment, every shift, reinforced their partnership and enhanced their ability to respond to the unpredictable universe around them. As they approached a particularly complex set of navigation controls, Ethan realized that their journey had transformed him. He was no longer merely a human captive. He was a participant, a contributor, and a partner. The commander's reputation as dangerous, formidable, and strategic had not intimidated him into passivity. Instead, it had inspired him to learn, adapt, and engage fully, using his unique perspective to complement her skill. The final test came in the form of a massive energy storm, an unpredictable phenomenon that threatened to destabilize the ship. Sensors detected rapid fluctuations in gravitational fields, electromagnetic interference, and potential damage to critical systems. Ethan's heart raced, but he did not panic. He had learned to trust the commander, to anticipate her movements, and to contribute meaningfully under pressure. Together, they approached the challenge with precision, observation, and ingenuity. The commander moved swiftly, manipulating controls and monitoring the storm's effects with flawless execution. Ethan followed, offering suggestions based on patterns he observed, making subtle adjustments that enhanced stability. Their chains guided their coordination, allowing them to act as a single unit despite the chaos around them. Each decision, each movement, was a blend of strategy, adaptability, and trust. Hours passed as they navigated the storm. The ship vibrated under their feet, alarms blared intermittently, and the energy fluctuations threatened to overwhelm the systems. Yet Ethan and the commander remained focused, moving with the rhythm they had developed over weeks of shared experience. Human ingenuity and alien precision worked in harmony, turning a potentially catastrophic situation into a manageable challenge. Finally, the storm subsided. The ship stabilized, systems returned to normal, and the corridors were once again filled with the steady hum of engines. Ethan sank to the floor, exhausted but exhilarated. The commander stood nearby, surveying the ship with calm intensity. For the first time, she allowed herself a subtle gesture of acknowledgement, a slight adjustment of the chains that gave him more freedom of movement, a silent recognition of his contributions and value. Ethan felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger alongside one of the most formidable beings he had ever encountered. The journey had transformed him, teaching him the power of observation, adaptability, and trust. He realized that humans, often underestimated by alien civilizations, possessed creativity, ingenuity, and moral judgment that could influence outcomes in meaningful ways. In the days that followed, the ship continued its journey, and Ethan and the commander moved through the corridors with ease, their chains a symbol not of captivity but of partnership. Every challenge they faced, every decision they made, strengthened the bond between them and reinforced the value of collaboration. Ethan's respect for her grew, and he understood that her danger was not merely physical. It was the product of intelligence, experience, and the ability to inspire both caution and admiration. One evening, as they observed a distant starfield, Ethan spoke softly. "We've come a long way. I never thought I'd be here doing this with you." The commander's amber eyes met his, and for the first time she offered a gesture that Ethan could interpret as approval, a slight tilt of the head, a soft acknowledgement of his words. It was not friendship, not in the human sense, but it was recognition, trust, and respect. As the ship continued its voyage, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he had awakened in a dim chamber, chained to a powerful and mysterious commander, he had grown, learned, and adapted. He had discovered that danger could be navigated with intelligence and trust, that human ingenuity could complement alien skill, and that partnership could transform even the most restrictive circumstances into opportunities for growth and achievement. The final lesson was clear. True strength lay not in physical power alone, but in the ability to observe, adapt, and collaborate. Ethan had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and in doing so, he had become more than a human prisoner. He had become a partner, a contributor, and a participant in a story that transcended species, culture, and expectation. And as the ship sailed through the endless expanse of space, Ethan and the commander moved together, chains taut but guiding, each step a testament to trust, cooperation, and the extraordinary potential of human ingenuity in a universe full of wonder, challenge, and possibility. They had survived, learned, and grown together. And in the quiet hum of the ship, Ethan realized something profound. Humans, when paired with intelligence, observation, and courage, could achieve the extraordinary, even in the presence of beings far more formidable and experienced. And that realization, more than anything else, filled him with hope, pride, and a sense of purpose that would carry him through the stars.